Hey, I am really glad you could join me on this journey. Tonight, we're going to take a quiet journey into something vast and a little mysterious, a place that feels both familiar and endlessly strange. Picture yourself right beside me as we drift into this thought experiment. Maybe you are curled up somewhere cozy with a warm drink. Maybe you are lying in bed. Or maybe you are outside under the open night sky. Wherever you are, let yourself settle in and feel the moment. Now, dim the lights around you. Let the soft hush of your room sink in. Maybe turn on a gentle fan or let the wind brush across your skin, and we'll ease into this journey together. Imagine the stars above you, their faint glow stretching across the darkness, and know that for the next little while, we are exploring them side by side. Take a deep breath and let your mind float into the quiet of the universe. Feel the calm, the vastness, the gentle pull of curiosity guiding us forward. Let yourself drift and notice everything around you as we step into this shared space. Hey everyone, today we are looking into stars and we are beginning with the moment the sun suddenly disappears. Not a slow fade, not a gentle dimming, but gone in an instant. 1 second the sky is bright, the ground is warm, and shadows stretch softly around us. The next second, there is nothing. The very first minute without the sun would feel unsettling in a way that is hard to describe. If you are standing outside with me, you would notice the light vanishing all at once. The blue dome above would collapse into deep black, as if someone had yanked down a curtain over the sky. Your eyes would struggle at first, caught between daylight and sudden night, but then stars would leap into view. It would be the middle of the day on Earth, yet the sky would look like midnight in the countryside, filled with thousands of pinpoints of light you have never noticed before. You might feel your breath catch in your throat. The silence would not be any louder than before, yet it would feel heavier, almost as if the world itself were holding its breath. Look up with me in that first minute, and you would see the Milky Way shining across the sky, brighter than you have ever seen, because no sunlight would be washing it away. Faint bands of glowing dust and billions of faraway suns would reveal themselves all at once. It would be beautiful, and at the same time deeply strange, because beauty is usually paired with comfort, and this beauty comes with unease. Now here is something that would surprise you. In that first minute, nothing on Earth would really change in terms of warmth. The air around us would still feel exactly the same. The ground would still be holding its heat. If you touched your skin or leaned against a sunlit wall, it would still feel warm because the sun's light that reached us had already left it about 8 minutes earlier. That means in the first 60 seconds, the warmth we feel is a memory, a gift that already left the star before it disappeared. If you focus on your body in that moment, you would not shiver or notice the temperature shift. The birds around us would keep chirping, people driving cars would keep going, clocks would keep ticking. For just that 1 minute, life would look almost normal except for the fact that the sky is suddenly full of stars. Imagine sitting in a park and seeing children still running in circles, but above them stretches the deepest night sky you could ever imagine. The contrast would be dizzying. And here is another thought. Gravity from the sun would also continue to hold Earth in its orbit for that first minute, because just like light, gravity takes time to travel. For those brief moments, we would still be circling something that is no longer there, like dancing with a partner who has already left the room. That idea alone makes me want to pause, look up, and take in the eeriness of it. So in that very first minute without the sun, you and I would be standing in a world that looks familiar and alien all at once. We would not yet feel the cold, we would not yet spin away into space, but we would already know something enormous has changed. So let us ask the question together. If the sun disappeared, would Earth go dark instantly, or would we still see it glowing for a little while? At first, it feels natural to think everything would vanish at once, but the truth is stranger and more gentle. Light does not appear the moment it is made. It travels. The sunlight that warms your face today actually left the surface of the sun about 8 minutes ago. That means the light we see at this moment is not really happening right now. It is a message sent from the past. So if the sun suddenly disappeared, we would not notice right away. For 8 whole minutes, the sky would look perfectly normal. The sun would still sit there in the blue sky like nothing had changed, pouring light across the land, touching the oceans with glitter, and throwing shadows onto the ground. If you were sitting with me in a field or walking along a city street, you would not suspect a thing. Birds would keep flying, cars would keep moving, the world would appear unchanged. It is only after those minutes have passed that everything would transform. The last rays that had already been on their way would finally reach us, and then no more would follow. Imagine it as a final letter arriving in the mailbox. You read it, you smile, and then the letters stop coming. That is how sunlight would behave. So Earth would not go dark instantly. For those 8 minutes we would still live inside a memory of the sun, as though the universe were giving us a short grace period to take one last look. I like to think of it as standing in the glow of a candle that has already been blown out, where the warmth lingers just a little longer than the flame. During that time we would also keep orbiting the sun's old position, because gravity travels the same way light does. We would continue circling nothing, unaware that the center had already vanished. That idea is unsettling but also strangely poetic. It means that for a few minutes we would be ghosts of ourselves, living in an echo of what used to be. Picture yourself now standing with me on a hilltop. The sun still shines in the sky, golden and bright, but we both know it is no longer truly there. You can feel the warmth on your skin. You can see the rays dancing across the grass, but you understand that this is the last light you will ever receive. Every second feels precious in a way that ordinary days never do. And then, at the end of that 8-minute stretch, the change would come. The sun's circle would vanish from the sky, the blue dome would collapse into black, and the stars would burst into view. The shift would be instant once it arrived, but not a moment before. So to answer our question, Earth would not go dark the moment the sun disappeared. Instead, we would enjoy a strange pause, an 8-minute farewell, a reminder that even light needs time to travel through space before it reaches us. The moment the sun's glow is gone, the sky above turns into a canvas of black so pure that it feels endless. The blue that once wrapped the Earth in softness disappears, leaving behind a dome filled with sharp pinpoints of starlight. Every corner of the heavens is suddenly awake. Stars that used to hide behind the daylight crowd the view all at once, and the Milky Way stretches across the firmament like a wide silver river, flowing from horizon to horizon. The brightness of it is startling. Without the sun to wash the sky, the Milky Way shows its texture clearly, with luminous knots of clustered stars and dark streaks of dust cutting across the shine. It feels like someone lifted a veil from your eyes, showing you a secret that was there all along. Even in places where the night sky usually looks dull, the heavens now shimmer with millions of lights. The city glow that once blocked the stars is still there, but weaker, because there is no sunlight scattered in the air to keep the haze alive. Between the rooftops of tall buildings or across wide fields, the sky seems closer and heavier with light than you have ever known. If you gaze long enough, entire galaxies reveal themselves. They appear as faint smudges, delicate clouds spread across the black, yet each one contains billions of suns. In a patch of sky no bigger than the palm of your hand, you might count more galaxies than you can imagine. Every time your eyes adjust, new details unfold, and the universe keeps stretching outward, refusing to end. The moon becomes something entirely different. Without sunlight bouncing off its surface, it no longer glows as a silver disk. Instead, it hangs in the darkness as a grey and silent ball, dull and heavy, like a stone drifting without light. The planets, too, lose their shine. Jupiter, Saturn, Mars, all the ones that usually sparkle like jewels in the night, fade into near invisibility because what made them bright was only the sun's reflection. They remain, but they no longer gleam. The stars, however, feel sharper than ever. Their colours come alive in a way that few people have seen before. Some glow faintly red, others blue or white, each one a sun burning far away. The brightest among them flicker gently, and if you reach your hand upward, you could almost imagine brushing your fingers against their shimmering light. The sky feels alive now, vibrating with endless sparks, and yet the absence of the sun makes it feel unbalanced, like a choir missing its lead voice. No sunrise will come to soften this view, no golden rays to scatter across the horizon. The earth is left under an eternal night. Shadows no longer stretch and shift with time, because the single source that cast them is gone. There is no twilight, no dawn, only the unwavering shine of distant stars. If you focus closely, you may notice a kind of weight in the sky, as if the darkness itself has substance. The universe above is not just black emptiness. It is filled with light so distant that it barely reaches us. And now, without the sun, nothing hides it. The heavens are crowded, endless, and humbling. Looking into them makes you realize how small Earth is, how fragile, just one world adrift without its star. So what would happen to the moon if the sun suddenly disappeared? Well, the first and most immediate change would be the loss of its glow. The moon has never produced light of its own. It has only borrowed sunlight, reflecting it back toward Earth like a great mirror in the sky. Without the sun to shine on it, that mirror would go dark in a heartbeat. Imagine stepping outside and expecting to see the bright disk rising over the horizon, only to find that it is gone, replaced by a dull shape lost against the stars. At first, you might think the moon has vanished entirely. The stars would be so bright and so numerous that they would steal your attention. The familiar white glow would no longer cut through the dark, and the sky would look strange without its nightly companion. But if you looked carefully, if you let your eyes adjust and followed its motion, you would see that the moon is still there. It would drift as a grey shadow across the heavens, blocking out stars as it moved. You might trace its edge where it passes in front of brighter constellations, like a silent ghost wandering through a crowded room. The beauty of the moon has always been tied to its glow. Its phases, the crescents and the full circle, are all shapes carved by sunlight. Without that light, there would be no crescents, no gentle glow building night after night until it becomes whole. The moon would no longer mark the passage of time in the sky. It would circle Earth as always, but without the silver clock face we have looked to for thousands of years. The connection people once felt, the comfort of watching the moon change, would vanish. What remains is only a cold rock, invisible unless you know where to look. Think about the world beneath that dark moon. On Earth, countless creatures live by its glow. Sea turtles hatch and make their way to the ocean guided by moonlight. Wolves lift their heads and howl at its brightness. Farmers once planted crops by its phases. Lovers have walked under its silver beams. All of that depends on borrowed sunlight. Without it, nights would fall into deeper shadow than any human has ever experienced. The stars would light the sky in great numbers, yes, but they do not brighten the ground. The forests, the oceans, the mountains would sink into a darkness so complete that the moon's absence would be felt everywhere. Now think about the tides. They are caused mostly by the pull of the moon, but the sun plays a part too. Together they shape the rhythm of the oceans, creating high tides and low tides across the world. Without the sun, that balance is broken. The moon still tugs on the water, pulling the seas toward it, but the missing influence of the sun would change the patterns. Tides would weaken. The harmony of the oceans would be disrupted. Coastlines would feel the shift, and the rhythm that has guided life for millions of years would falter. And then there is the bond between Earth and the moon. The sun's gravity does not just hold Earth in place, it also steadies the moon's orbit. Without the sun, Earth drifts freely into the galaxy, and the moon follows along. They remain together, the moon still circling Earth as a loyal companion, but now both are wandering without direction. Picture the two of them as dancers. The sun was the music that kept their steps steady. When the music stops, they do not stop dancing, but their movements become unanchored, gliding slowly across an endless floor with no pattern. The moon would still rise and set in the sky, pulled by Earth's gravity, but what you see when it rises would be different. Instead of a glowing silver coin, you would see a dim roundness, a hollow shadow crossing the heavens. Children who once looked for the face of the moon would see nothing but darkness where a friend once hung. Yet, in that darkness there is something hauntingly beautiful. Imagine lying on your back in a field, staring at the heavens. The moon drifts by silently, and in its place the stars shine in unimaginable numbers. Where its bright light once washed out faint constellations, Now the sky is sharper. Nebulas that were hidden appear as glowing clouds. Galaxies spread across the night as soft swirls. The moon has lost its glow, but by stepping aside it allows the universe to shine even brighter. Still, the moon's silence would always remind us of what we lost. It would remain by Earth's side, faithful as ever, but stripped of its silver light. No more crescent guiding sailors. No more full circle lighting forests. Only a dark companion circling in shadow, a reminder of the sun that is no longer there. So would stars suddenly become brighter if the sun disappeared? The answer feels both simple and surprising. The stars themselves would not change at all. They would keep shining just as they have for billions of years, burning far away in silence. But to our eyes on Earth, they would seem to leap into brilliance the moment the sun's light fades. It is not that they are brighter, it is that the curtain hiding them has been pulled away. Imagine standing in the middle of a busy city during the day. The sun is shining, the sky is blue, and you know the stars are still up there, but you cannot see them. The daylight scatters across the air, filling every corner, washing out the delicate shine of distant suns. When the sun disappears, that blue glow collapses instantly. The sky turns black, and the stars are revealed in full. It is like being in a theatre where the stage lights suddenly turn off and every small candle in the audience comes into view. They were always burning, but now you finally notice them. At first your eyes would struggle, caught between the memory of daylight and the sudden flood of darkness. But then the heavens would open up, in a way that few humans have ever witnessed. Stars that were invisible, even at the darkest midnight, would now sparkle clearly. Thousands would appear where you once saw only dozens. The Milky Way would no longer be a faint band. It would be a roaring river of light stretched across the entire sky. It would look thick and textured, with glowing knots where clusters of stars gather, and dark streaks where cosmic dust blocks the light. If you looked long enough, you would see more than just stars. Galaxies would show themselves as faint swirls, pale and delicate. Some would look like hazy clouds, while others would reveal a bright center. Each one would be a city of billions of suns, all shining together. Without the sun to drown them out, even the smallest smudges of light become visible. You might trace a finger through the sky, moving from one galaxy to another, realizing just how crowded the universe is. And there is something else that would strike you. The stars do not all shine with the same color. Some would burn blue and sharp, others soft and golden, and some faintly red. Normally our eyes only catch the brightest ones, but in this eternal night, the full palette of the cosmos would be revealed. The sky would no longer feel like a flat sheet sprinkled with white dots. It would feel alive, filled with points of every shade, each carrying its own story of distance and age. From Earth, the effect would be overwhelming. People who are used to seeing only a handful of stars in their lives would now be confronted with millions. In the countryside, the view would be staggering, but even in the heart of great cities, the heavens would shine in numbers no one could ignore. The sky would pull attention away from every streetlight, every building, every distraction. You would look up and see so many stars that it would be difficult to find familiar constellations among them. Shapes like Orion or the Big Dipper would dissolve into seas of light, their patterns drowned in the flood of countless new stars. The brilliance would also change how nights feel on Earth. Normally, the moon and the sun shape our sense of time. Without them, the stars would become the only guides. Imagine whole cultures trying to orient themselves by constellations, building a new calendar based on shifting points of light. Sailors might once again turn to the stars for navigation, but this time every horizon would be crowded with markers. The night sky would no longer be a quiet backdrop. It would be a constant companion, glowing with such intensity that it would feel both beautiful and heavy. Yet with all of this beauty comes unease. Stars appearing brighter is not a gift of their generosity, but a reminder of what has been lost. The sun is no longer there to outshine them. Its absence makes them visible, but it also leaves Earth in cold and darkness. You would stand there, stunned by the glory of the universe, and at the same time shiver at the silence of a world without its star. Still, there is no denying that the heavens would look magnificent. It would be the clearest night sky, that has ever existed. The smallest flickers of light would find their way to your eyes, and the cosmos would show itself fully for the first time. To gaze upward in those moments would be to feel both wonder and humility. The stars are not brighter, but without the sun, they finally have the stage to themselves. But would Earth start freezing immediately if the sun vanished? Well, the answer is both simple and a little more complicated than you might think. Heat from the sun does not linger forever. Without it, the energy keeping our oceans liquid, our air warm, and life alive begins to disappear. The first moments are still bearable because Earth itself holds heat. The ground, the oceans, and even the atmosphere store warmth that can last for a short while. Picture standing outside in the hour after the sun vanishes. You would not feel the instant bite of freezing air. The sky is dark, yes, and the light is gone, but the temperature remains close to what it was a moment before. The air still carries the residual warmth of the day, and the seas are still mostly liquid. If you walk across grass, you might notice it starting to feel cooler under your feet, but it is gradual. The world does not collapse into ice immediately. Within a few hours, though, the chill begins to spread. The atmosphere starts losing heat to space because there is no more sunlight to replenish it. Winds would pick up as temperature differences form across land and sea, carrying frost in unpredictable ways. Oceans begin to cool at the surface, slowly radiating heat upward and outward. Imagine standing by the shore as the water begins to feel colder than your body. You shiver not from wind alone, but from the slow, creeping disappearance of warmth itself. After a few days, the process accelerates. Without sunlight, the surface temperature of Earth drops quickly. Plants would freeze and stop producing oxygen. Animals adapted to daytime warmth would struggle. Rivers and lakes would begin to form ice on top. If you were watching from a hilltop, you would see the frost spreading across the land like a white blanket creeping inward from the edges. The nights are eternal now, and the cold intensifies. Within a week, much of the Earth's surface would be below freezing. Snow would accumulate in places that normally never see it. Forests would become silent, frozen in place. The oceans are still not entirely frozen, but the top layers start to stiffen and crack. Underneath, water remains liquid for a time, trapped by the enormous thermal mass of the planet. Life clings to these last pockets of relative warmth, waiting for some improbable miracle, but the heat is steadily being pulled away into space. As months pass, the deep freeze spreads even further. Coastal regions freeze first, then inland areas follow. Mountains and plains alike are coated with ice. The planet's rotation continues, but it offers no comfort. Every side experiences the same dark chill. You can imagine walking across this frozen landscape, seeing the horizon blur into white and black, feeling the bite of cold in every direction. It is a slow, relentless process that reminds you how much warmth came from a star you no longer have. Even under the oceans, life struggles. Only the deepest waters retain some warmth from geothermal energy beneath the crust. Deep-sea creatures cling to these pockets of heat, moving in a world that is slowly freezing around them. The upper layers of the oceans are solidifying, reducing circulation. Fish and other animals must adapt quickly or perish. The currents that once carried heat and nutrients begin to slow as the surface freezes. And yet there is a strange beauty in this frozen transformation. Glaciers would form rapidly in the polar regions and march toward the equator. Lakes become perfect mirrors under the dark sky, reflecting stars that seem brighter without the sun. The world is quieter, stiller, more crystalline. It is a deadly beauty, but beauty nonetheless. The exact speed of freezing depends on many factors. The atmosphere holds heat longer than the land, the oceans slow the drop in temperature, and geothermal activity beneath the crust provides tiny pockets of warmth. But the overall trajectory is clear. Without the sun, Earth begins an unstoppable march toward deep freeze within days. Weeks and months transform the planet into a world of ice, darkness, and silence. Now, could humans survive in a world without sunlight? Well, the short answer is that it would be incredibly difficult, almost impossible on a large scale. But there are pockets where survival might stretch longer than you expect. Humans are creatures designed to rely on sunlight in so many ways, not just for warmth but for food, energy, and even our body clocks. Without the sun, our entire system begins to falter. Picture yourself in the first few days after the sun disappears. The sky is black, the air is cooling, and the natural rhythm of day and night is gone. People might still be warm inside houses, and some would feel relief from the sudden quiet darkness, but already the need for heat becomes urgent. Without sunlight, crops can no longer grow. Plants cannot photosynthesize, so our primary food source starts to vanish. Humans can eat stored food, but reserves only last so long, and the colder it gets, the harder it is to stay nourished. Imagine traveling through a city as darkness takes over. Streetlights glow faintly, smoke rises from chimneys, and people huddle around whatever heat they can find. Fire becomes vital, not just for comfort, but for survival. Wood and fuel become precious resources. Humans quickly learn that warmth is life itself. Any shelter without heat is dangerous. The air outside feels sharper, the cold bites through clothing, and frost forms everywhere. The simplest tasks, like fetching water or chopping wood, become exhausting. After a few weeks, only humans who can find strong shelters and reliable heat sources continue to survive. Underground bunkers, geothermal hotspots, and heated caves become havens. Imagine moving silently through frozen streets or forests to reach these safe zones. Communities form around them, sharing resources, knowledge, and warmth. Cooperation becomes essential because isolated survival is almost impossible. Even with food, cold and darkness take a mental toll. Humans are not designed for eternal night, and the psychological strain is enormous. The problem of food is immediate and dire. Without sunlight, agriculture fails completely. Greenhouses can provide temporary solutions if artificial lights are available, but energy must come from somewhere else. Hydroponics with artificial light powered by generators or geothermal energy could sustain some populations for months or years, but it is fragile. Hunting and fishing become unreliable as the surface freezes and oceans develop ice layers. Humans are forced to rely on stored supplies, underground farming, and eventually engineered solutions for survival. Even if people manage warmth and food, there is the matter of air and water. Frozen lakes and rivers make water difficult to access. People must melt ice to drink, which demands more fuel and energy. Air circulation indoors becomes critical because enclosed spaces can quickly become uninhabitable without ventilation. Humans must become clever engineers, designing ways to extract heat, light, and food from a world that no longer gives these gifts freely. There are strange adaptations humans might try. Living deep underground, where geothermal heat provides a constant source, humans could create cities shielded from the freezing darkness. Artificial light could mimic day and night, helping maintain circadian rhythms and psychological health. Food could be grown in hydroponic farms, powered by the heat of the earth, or by nuclear reactors, but every step requires careful planning and constant effort. Despite these possible adaptations, survival is precarious. Most of the planet becomes unlivable for humans without extensive preparation. Only regions with reliable heat, water, and energy could sustain life. The rest of Earth becomes a frozen wasteland, where even animals struggle and plants die off. Humans, in such a world, are no longer the dominant species. They become small pockets of life, clinging to warmth and light in the darkness. And yet, there is a strange resilience in imagining this. Humans are resourceful. We have adapted to deserts, polar regions, and deep caves. With ingenuity, we could survive longer than one might think, but it would be a harsh existence. The absence of sunlight changes everything. Life becomes a constant struggle against the cold, the dark, and dwindling resources. Every day would demand careful attention, cooperation, and determination to simply continue. What happens to plants and animals without the sun? Well, the truth is that life as we know it depends on sunlight in ways so deep that removing it touches everything immediately. Plants, of course, are the first to feel the loss. They cannot perform photosynthesis. the process that turns sunlight into energy. Picture a forest or a meadow. Within hours, leaves stop producing sugars, flowers lose their vibrancy, and trees begin to rely solely on stored energy. Those reserves last a short while, maybe a few days to a couple of weeks, but once they are gone, the plant begins to wither. Now think about the animals. Herbivores feel the impact next. Deer, rabbits, insects, and countless other creatures depend directly on plants for food. As the greenery fades, they scavenge what remains, but the options shrink rapidly. You might imagine small birds hopping through frozen trees, searching desperately for seeds that are no longer replenished. Their calls echo in a darkened, colder world. Predators soon follow the collapse of herbivores. Wolves, foxes, and other carnivores find their prey dwindling. The natural balance of life destabilizes quickly. Some animals can survive longer than others. Deep-sea creatures, cave dwellers, and species that rely less on sunlight might continue their routines for months or even years. But surface life changes dramatically. Insects die in large numbers as temperature drops and food disappears. Amphibians and reptiles, sensitive to cold, freeze rapidly. Mammals with stored fat survive a bit longer, but even they struggle in extreme cold. You might picture a herd of animals huddling together on a frozen plain, the frost sparkling around their breath, the stars above brighter without sunlight, yet the world below relentlessly freezing. Oceans respond differently, but also dramatically. Phytoplankton, the microscopic plants floating near the surface, cease photosynthesis almost instantly. They are the foundation of the marine food chain. Fish, whales, and other sea creatures begin to experience scarcity. Surface waters cool rapidly, freezing eventually in many regions. Only the deepest parts of the ocean, warmed by geothermal vents, retain life. But even those ecosystems shrink as food from above becomes rare. Even insects that survive the first days are soon caught in a chain reaction. Pollinators vanish as flowers die, and without them, new plants cannot reproduce. Seeds that would germinate in spring remain dormant, waiting for sunlight that will never return. The natural cycles of birth, growth, and death grind to a halt. You might imagine a quiet meadow frozen in time, with the faint sound of a few surviving creatures echoing like whispers through the icy air. Some plants and animals can use stored energy and adaptations to hold out longer, but the planet cannot support large populations. Life retreats to hidden pockets where warmth and moisture remain, perhaps under thick soil, deep in caves, or near geothermal activity. These microcosms become refuges for life, small islands of survival in a dark and frozen world. Imagine creeping slowly through one of these secret habitats. The air smells faintly of damp earth and decay, and tiny creatures scurry cautiously, illuminated by whatever faint glow or heat source exists nearby. Eventually, ecosystems collapse on the surface. Forests become silent skeletons of trees. Grasslands are buried in frost and snow. Rivers freeze or slow to sluggish trickles under ice. Animals either migrate underground, die, or adapt in tiny numbers. Predators vanish as prey disappears. Oceans slow in circulation, and coral reefs bleach permanently. Life contracts into minimal forms, holding onto energy wherever it can be found. And yet, even in this frozen, darkened world, there is resilience. Microbes, fungi, and extremophiles persist. Some plants sprout briefly from stored seeds. Animals that survive find ways to scavenge and share. Life becomes a quiet, slow, patient struggle. Every heartbeat, every small survival, is precious in a planet without sunlight. Would our atmosphere change without sunlight? Absolutely, and the changes begin almost immediately in ways you might not expect. The sun does more than warm the planet and grow our food. It drives winds, ocean currents, and the very cycle of air and water. Without sunlight, those systems start to falter. Picture standing outside on the first day after the sun disappears. The wind that once moved gently through trees slows and falters. Air currents that carried warmth from the equator to the poles begin to weaken. The sky above darkens, not just from absence of light, but from the slowing of circulation patterns that usually keep dust, clouds, and gases moving. The first noticeable change is temperature. The surface of the Earth begins to cool rapidly. The air contracts, becoming denser near the ground. As cold air sinks, it pushes warmer air upward, but without the sun replenishing energy, this process slows. Winds diminish, and calm settles unnaturally over landscapes. Imagine a city street. The usual rustle of leaves and the whisper of distant wind is gone. The air feels heavier and still, almost like it resists movement. The same happens over oceans, where wind-driven waves grow calmer. Storms, hurricanes, and normal weather patterns vanish as the energy from sunlight disappears. Clouds behave differently too. Water vapor in the air begins to condense as temperatures drop. Humidity falls, rain becomes rare, and snowfall dominates. The frozen world traps water in ice, slowing the natural cycle of evaporation and precipitation. Imagine looking up at a sky layered with thick, motionless clouds, the edges shimmering faintly in starlight. Air near the surface feels drier, heavier, and colder. The sky that once seemed alive now carries a hushed, frozen silence. The composition of the atmosphere shifts subtly as well. Carbon dioxide levels may stay the same initially, but without plants absorbing it through photosynthesis, it begins to build over time in certain areas. Oxygen production halts completely, although the existing levels can sustain humans for years if we remain careful. Gases normally lifted and dispersed by winds now linger, creating pockets of stillness. Imagine walking through a forest where the air feels thicker, and even your breath seems louder in the frozen quiet. Temperature differences that drive the jet streams fade, causing long-term stagnation. Air near the poles and equator cools toward the same temperature, flattening the usual gradients that power storms. The atmosphere becomes more stable in motion but more extreme in pressure. Differences in isolated areas. Strong pressure zones can create sudden gusts, but they are unpredictable and dangerous. Imagine standing at the edge of a frozen plain, feeling a sudden gust of air that seems to come from nowhere, the cold searing against your skin. Over weeks and months, these changes compound. Oceans freeze over gradually, slowing evaporation and reducing humidity even further. Precipitation becomes almost entirely snow or ice. Drought-like conditions strike areas that previously had moderate rainfall. The air is heavy with cold, carrying frost and snow instead of warmth. Imagine stepping outside and noticing frost forming in seconds on your eyelashes, on your clothing, on everything you touch. Even the gentle sigh of wind carries a bitter chill. The absence of sunlight also halts the process of photodissociation in the upper atmosphere, where sunlight normally helps break down molecules and maintain ozone balance. The ozone layer and other chemical balances remain static, but the protective function continues only until other disruptions occur. Cosmic radiation and energetic particles from space might penetrate more easily over time if certain reactions slow, subtly affecting air chemistry. And yet, despite the freezing and stagnation, the atmosphere is not immediately deadly. Humans can still breathe, and the air remains largely safe in the short term. The danger comes from temperature collapse, lack of wind-driven weather, and the long-term inability of the air to interact with life on the surface. Imagine the world outside as a silent, frozen bubble, the air still but heavy, the sky dark, and the usual breath of wind gone from the planet entirely. What happens to the oceans without the sun's heat? Imagine looking out over the vast expanse of the sea and realizing that the warmth you once felt on the waves is gone. The sun is the engine that drives ocean currents, keeps surface waters moving, and stores energy that regulates temperature across the globe. Without it, the first thing you would notice is that surface waters begin to cool almost instantly. Picture the top layer of the ocean dropping in temperature, the gentle warmth vanishing, leaving a crisp bite that seeps through the air above. At first, the cooling is gradual, a few degrees within hours, but soon the process accelerates. The surface water becomes denser as it chills and begins to sink, creating an unusual shift in circulation. Normally, Sunlight keeps water moving, expanding, contracting, rising and falling, but now that rhythm falters. Waves lose some of their familiar movement. The rolling oceans grow quieter, almost eerie. You might imagine standing at a shore where the waves lap gently but feel unusually heavy and slow. The horizon blurred under a sky darkened by the absence of sunlight. Ice starts forming at the poles and then spreads toward temperate zones. Sea ice thickens as the upper layers freeze, reflecting starlight instead of sunlight. This also traps the water below in colder, denser layers, creating a stratified ocean where movement slows dramatically. Surface waters freeze, but deep currents continue weakly for a while, powered only by residual heat from the planet's interior. Imagine drifting on a frozen sea where chunks of ice float silently, some towering above the water like frozen skyscrapers, the silence broken only by the occasional cracking or shifting ice. Marine life is affected almost immediately. Phytoplankton, the microscopic plants that float near the surface and form the foundation of the food chain, can no longer photosynthesize. They die off, taking energy away from countless species. Fish, whales, and other creatures experience food scarcity. Surface waters cool and lose oxygen, while deeper waters remain slightly warmer but isolated. Imagine a school of fish moving slowly through darkening, freezing waters, the silence more pronounced than anything you have felt above. Tides continue for a while, driven by the moon's gravity, but the overall motion of oceans weakens. Storms that rely on warm water vanish, leaving the seas eerily still. Icebergs grow larger, spreading from the poles, and eventually, much of the surface water becomes locked in ice. The dynamic life of oceans slows to near stillness. The once thriving ecosystem at the surface retreats to hidden depths, where warmth from geothermal vents sustains the few resilient creatures. Imagine gliding over an abyss where strange alien organisms cling to life around dark vents, their faint glow the only light in a frozen world. The chemical composition of the oceans begins to shift as well. Without sunlight, certain reactions slow or stop entirely. Dissolved oxygen decreases in the upper layers as photosynthesis ceases. Salinity increases in places where ice forms, leaving pockets of dense, extremely cold water. Ocean currents, weakened and trapped under ice, lose their ability to transport heat and nutrients. Imagine floating through one of these deep pockets of water, cold seeping through every layer, the movement almost imperceptible, and the creatures around you adapted to a life without light and warmth. Over months and years, the oceans become vast frozen deserts at the surface. Only a few deep, geothermal-fed oases remain, sustaining life in isolated patches. Ice covers much of the planet, and the remaining water circulates slowly in a planet that has lost its main source of energy. You might picture a world where the sea is silent and hard, sparkling under starlight, carrying the memory of its former warmth and motion like a dream. Would Earth drift away into space without the sun's gravity? Imagine, for a moment, that the invisible thread holding our planet in its gentle orbit suddenly vanished. 1 second, we are gliding gracefully around the sun at 30 kilometers per second, the vast curves of space shaping our path without effort. The next, that guiding pull disappears, leaving Earth free to move in a straight line. Picture the planet breaking away from its familiar circle, shooting silently into the dark unknown, carrying oceans, mountains, and forests with it like a fragile spaceship. At first, nothing feels different to someone standing on the surface. The wind still blows, rivers still run, and life continues unaware of the enormous change happening around it. But the sky begins to shift subtly. The moon, still bound to Earth, traces a new, slightly altered path overhead, tugged by gravity that now only partially balances the planet's new trajectory. Stars no longer slowly rise and fall in familiar patterns. Instead, the whole cosmos seems to subtly tilt and change, the constellations shifting imperceptibly as we move away from our old home. As days pass, the lack of the sun's gravitational tether becomes more dramatic. Earth follows a straight trajectory through space, drifting ever farther from the warmth and light we relied on. Oceans begin to chill faster, frozen at the edges, and weather patterns collapse without the sun's energy to drive winds and currents. You can imagine standing on a frozen shore, seeing the stars swirl faintly overhead as the planet sails silently through darkness, and feeling the creeping realization that everything has changed. The moon dances along with us, orbiting in a strange new elliptical path influenced by our planet's sudden movement. Tides behave differently, unpredictable and irregular, sometimes stronger in unusual places, sometimes weaker than ever before. Waves clash against ice in new ways, creating strange, haunting patterns on the frozen seas. Picture walking along an unfamiliar coast, where the tides seem almost alive, following a rhythm you can no longer predict. The moon's pull, a ghostly echo of what it used to be. Over weeks and months, the consequences deepen. Without the sun's gravity, Earth is no longer anchored to a predictable orbit. Collisions with distant asteroids or other debris become more likely as we wander through regions of space previously untouched. The atmosphere starts to cool faster as Earth moves away from the sun's gentle influence, and the oceans freeze more extensively. Life becomes a struggle for survival, with humans, animals, and plants fighting against the creeping cold, the weight of frozen air, and the strange patterns of tides and weather. Even the stars themselves seem different from our drifting perspective. Normally, familiar constellations slowly shift in the sky because we orbit the sun and the Earth spins in predictable ways. Now, traveling in a straight line, the constellations drift across the horizon in unusual ways, the Milky Way stretching differently as if the universe itself were bending around our newfound trajectory. Imagine gazing at this altered sky and feeling both awe and unease, realizing that the invisible threads of gravity that once held life in balance are gone, and the planet is alone, moving quietly through infinite darkness. What happens to the solar system without the sun holding it together? Imagine, for a moment, that the sun's immense gravity, the invisible force that binds planets, asteroids, and comets in their precise paths, suddenly vanished. The entire solar system, a delicate dance that has lasted for billions of years, would unravel instantly. Planets that once traced predictable orbits would shoot off into the darkness of space in straight lines, each carrying its moons, rings, and atmospheres with them, set adrift in a vast cosmic ocean. Picture Mercury, the closest planet to where the sun once blazed, breaking free from its orbit. It would move in a straight line through space at an astonishing speed, no longer pulled toward the central light that once dominated its sky. Venus and Earth, still spinning on their axes, would follow suit, racing away on their independent trajectories. Imagine looking at Earth from a distance and seeing it drift slowly from the sun's former position, oceans freezing at the surface, atmosphere cooling, the moon orbiting in a slightly warped path as it tries to keep pace with our planet. Mars and the gas giants would no longer trace their orderly loops around the sun. Jupiter, with its immense size, would still exert some gravitational influence over its moons, but its orbit would no longer be a comforting loop in space. Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune would scatter, the giant planets sending their moons off in wild arcs, some colliding with each other, others wandering freely. The asteroid belt, once a relatively stable region, would dissolve, sending rocks of every size on unpredictable paths, a new cosmic shooting gallery moving through the void. Comets and dwarf planets like Pluto, once held in distant elliptical orbits, would hurtle into the darkness at incredible speeds. Without the sun, the familiar rhythm of the solar system would vanish, leaving a chaotic, silent storm of celestial bodies drifting aimlessly. You might imagine standing on a planet as asteroids whiz past, comets streaking overhead, and the familiar sky completely transformed, no central star to orient the motion of day and night. Even the Kuiper belt and Oort cloud, those icy outer regions of the solar system, would be affected. Objects that took thousands or even millions of years to complete orbits would escape entirely, traveling into interstellar space. The entire architecture of the solar system, built over billions of years, would collapse into an unrecognizable state, Some planets and moons might pass close enough to one another to experience gravitational tugging, sending them spinning into unpredictable courses or even collisions. Imagine floating in space, drifting alongside one of these runaway planets. You would see moons tugged violently by their parent planets, comets flaring as their ice melts in the absence of predictable solar heat, and distant dwarf planets spinning quietly into the abyss. The Sun, once the heart of this grand system, now gone, leaves a silent, cold emptiness, with the planets no longer part of a family, but travelers alone on their separate paths. In this new reality, gravitational interactions would become the dominant force. Some planets might capture former moons or asteroids, forming small, temporary systems of their own. Others could pass dangerously close to one another, exchanging momentum in chaotic encounters that could reshape their trajectories forever. Over millions of years, what was once a structured solar system would become a sparse collection of wandering bodies, each on a lonely journey through the galaxy. A silent reminder of the invisible hand that once held everything together. Could any life survive deep underground or in the oceans if the sun disappeared? Well, imagine for a moment that the bright warmth and gentle light we rely on vanish entirely. On the surface, freezing winds howl across a planet sliding into darkness, and oceans slowly start to solidify from the top down. Yet beneath this frozen shell, life has a secret. Deep underground and far below the surface of the oceans, warmth can persist, clinging to the Earth's inner heat, a quiet pulse that sunlight never touches. Picture yourself sinking into one of these hidden worlds, maybe a cave far beneath mountains, where temperatures remain steady, the walls damp and cool, but not icy. Microbes and fungi cling to rocks, feeding off minerals and the faint chemical energy seeping through the earth. You might imagine tiny colonies of worms and insects, creatures adapted to eternal darkness, scuttling over damp stone or through narrow tunnels, completely unaffected by the cold above. The Earth's crust holds a tiny sanctuary, a pocket of life that doesn't rely on the sun at all, surviving on geothermal energy instead. Now let's drift down into the ocean, deep beneath where sunlight can ever reach. The water here is calm, dark, and heavy, yet life still thrives. Strange, glowing organisms float through the pitch black, their bioluminescence painting the water in shimmering patterns. Giant tube worms rise from hydrothermal vents, their red plumes swaying in currents, feeding off chemicals spewed from the planet's interior. Fishes and crustaceans adapted to eternal dark swim silently past, some with enormous eyes, others with no eyes at all, sensing the world in ways we cannot. You can almost reach out and feel the gentle vibration of currents carrying warmth from the deep, a pulse of life in a frozen world. Over time, even these refuges would face challenges. The oceans near the surface freeze, creating a thick ice crust that cuts off sunlight and limits surface interaction. Surface life dies off, leaving nutrient cycles disrupted, but deep hydrothermal ecosystems continue, isolated and self-sustaining, like small, stubborn oases in a cold, dark desert. You can imagine standing on the seafloor, looking up at a frozen surface miles above, feeling the faint hum of heat rising from the vents, realizing that life, even when the sun is gone, has a stubborn way of surviving. Some microbes might even spread through underground water veins, slowly moving nutrients to unexpected pockets, sustaining tiny ecosystems far from the light. Life becomes smaller, quieter, slower, but persistent. Picture a tiny shrimp navigating a narrow underwater tunnel, sensing the faint chemical trails left by generations before it, completely unaware of the frozen world above. These hidden pockets of survival are a testament to the resilience of life, showing that even in a world without the sun, there are refuges where organisms cling to existence, waiting for a chance that may never come to reach the surface again. The beauty of these hidden worlds is how different they feel from the surface. Silence is deeper, the dark thicker, and every flicker of movement or glow feels extraordinary. You might imagine following a faint phosphorescent trail through the depths of a cavern, or along a ridge of hydrothermal vents, feeling the steady, unchanging warmth beneath your fingers, a stark contrast to the frozen, dark surface above. Life here does not race against time or seasons, it simply exists, a quiet heartbeat in a planet otherwise plunged into stillness and cold. Would humans build artificial suns to survive if the real sun disappeared? Well, imagine looking up at a frozen, dark sky and realizing the familiar warmth and light are gone forever. Every day and night would stretch into a cold, silent void, and the surface of the planet would slowly turn into a frozen wasteland. In this desperate reality, people would have to become inventors and dreamers in ways never seen before, using ingenuity to recreate what nature had once provided effortlessly. Picture massive cities buried deep underground or inside enormous domes, each one like a little sunlit bubble in a dark world. Engineers and scientists would work tirelessly, building glowing spheres and panels that radiate heat and light, trying to mimic the sun's gentle, life-giving rays. Imagine stepping into one of these domes, feeling the warmth brushing against your skin, seeing shadows cast on the walls, and smelling the faint scent of artificial warmth mingled with recycled air. People would plant crops beneath synthetic light, watching green leaves stretch and reach for an invisible sun, and you could almost hear the hum of machinery working like the heartbeat of a fragile, artificial world. Now think even bigger. Could humanity attempt to build true suns, spheres of fusion fire that hover in orbit above cities, radiating energy to the surface? Picture teams of astronauts and engineers sending enormous structures into space, assembling them with precision, each panel and coil channeling heat and light to mimic the sun's life-giving glow. People would look up at these distant artificial stars and feel hope, a reminder that human creativity can bend even the harshest realities. You might imagine standing in a snowy city, watching an artificial sun rise above the horizon, its light bouncing off icy buildings, giving the frozen world a temporary shimmer of warmth and color. Even smaller portable suns would appear. Families could live in moving vehicles powered by glowing cores, exploring the frozen wasteland while keeping their own little sun nearby. Imagine walking through a desolate street and seeing children playing under tiny, suspended orbs of light, shadows dancing across ice-crusted walls. Communities would adapt to these glowing centers, festivals and celebrations taking place around them, people finding comfort in the fact that even in darkness, they can create light. Over time, these artificial suns might evolve into ecosystems of their own, powering life support systems, growing food, and warming cities. Humans would have to master energy, fusion, and sustainable systems in ways never imagined before, turning ingenuity into survival. You could imagine teams of engineers constantly monitoring their creations, adjusting their brightness, heat output, and position to ensure the fragile balance of life continues. Every artificial sun would feel like a small miracle, a tangible reminder that even when the universe withdraws its warmth, human determination can shine through. And yet, in this world of artificial suns, people would constantly glance at the empty sky, remembering what was lost. The darkness above would remind everyone how precious light and warmth are, and how fragile life can become without them. These man-made suns would not only be tools of survival but symbols of resilience and creativity, small islands of life in a frozen ocean of silence and cold. You might imagine reaching out and feeling the heat from one of these artificial suns, the warmth tangible, comforting, yet a little bittersweet because it is made by human hands rather than nature's perfect design. Could we move to another planet if the sun disappeared? Well, imagine looking out at the frozen Earth and realizing that the familiar warmth and light that cradled every life form are gone. The oceans are solid at the top, forests lie under layers of frost, and cities glint cold and silent beneath a starless sky. Humanity would face a choice unlike any before: stay on a planet that is slipping into a frozen grave or embark on a desperate journey to another world. Now picture the incredible challenge of leaving Earth. Rockets and ships would need to survive the freezing temperatures, the darkness, and the loss of natural gravitational guidance from the sun. Engineers would work tirelessly to calculate courses, relying on the faint gravitational tugs of distant planets or moons to navigate. You might imagine standing in a massive launch bay, watching enormous ships lined up like silver sentinels, engines humming in anticipation, carrying the hope of survival. People would board these vessels with hearts full of uncertainty, glancing at the icy planet below, unsure if they will ever return. Which planets could we even go to? Without the sun, the nearby planets would be frozen wastelands as well. Mars, usually cold but still warmed a little by sunlight, would now be a frigid desert. Venus would lose its faint glow of reflected light and sink into dark clouds, its surface impossibly hostile. Gas giants like Jupiter and Saturn, though massive, offer no solid ground, and their swirling storms would rage in darkness. You might imagine scientists calculating potential habitable zones around distant stars, considering interstellar travel for the first time on a massive scale. These journeys would take years, decades, or even centuries, requiring ships that function like miniature worlds, full of artificial suns, life support, and endless corridors of cultivation. Imagine stepping inside one of these interstellar vessels. The walls glow softly with light mimicking the sun. Warmth radiates around you, and hydroponic gardens hum with life. Children play under artificial skies. Fish swim in tanks filled with recycled water, and air circulates in perfect rhythm to keep life comfortable. Every corridor, every corner would be carefully designed to sustain human life for generations if necessary, because a single miscalculation could mean the end of humanity's last hope. Traveling between stars, people would become intimately aware of space itself. Silence would be profound, the void pressing against the hull, stars streaking past as ships accelerate to unimaginable speeds. Imagine looking out a window at a galaxy drifting by, feeling both awe and the smallness of humanity, realizing the sun that once ruled your life is gone forever. Communities would develop aboard these ships, creating new cultures, new ways of measuring time without sunrise or sunset, inventing festivals around artificial cycles of light and warmth. And yet, the question remains, even if we reach a distant planet with a new star, how would life change? Would we still feel connected to the Earth we left behind? You might imagine people planting the first seeds on an alien world under artificial suns, wondering if their children will ever know the true sun. In this vast and frozen universe, the act of moving to another planet becomes not just survival, but a quiet, stubborn declaration that life refuses to end. What happens to space travel without the sun's energy? Well, imagine drifting through the cosmos where the brilliant anchor of the solar system has vanished, leaving planets frozen, light dimmed, and the familiar warmth gone. Rockets and spacecraft that once relied on solar panels for power would suddenly face a profound challenge, their gleaming wings and arrays unable to draw energy from the vanished star. You might picture astronauts floating in a darkened cabin, watching instruments flicker, realizing that every bit of energy now must come from batteries, fuel, or human-made systems instead of the steady, reliable stream of sunlight. Without the sun, navigation becomes a puzzle. We rely on the positions of planets and the light of stars to orient ourselves, but now the inner solar system is cloaked in darkness. Imagine plotting a course toward Mars, where the planet itself is frozen and barely visible. Spaceships would need to use gravitational tugs from distant planets or moons, or perhaps onboard sensors that can detect the faint glow of far-off stars. You could almost hear the quiet hum of engines working overtime to compensate for lost solar energy. Each adjustment a delicate calculation in a world where old rules no longer apply. Even propulsion would feel different. Solar sails, which catch sunlight like giant cosmic kites, would become useless, leaving engineers scrambling to design alternatives. Fusion or fission engines might be pressed into service more urgently, their quiet roars filling the vast emptiness of space as ships push forward. Imagine standing in a control room aboard a ship, watching trajectories and fuel levels flicker on screens, each decision a delicate dance between survival and the infinite dark. Fuel and resources would become precious beyond imagination. Every journey, whether to a neighboring planet or a distant moon, would require meticulous planning to avoid running out of energy in a cold, starless void. Picture a crew carefully rationing every watt of power, every drop of fuel, all the while navigating a sky that no longer reflects the sun's familiar light. Even communication becomes trickier. Satellites, which often depend on solar energy, would struggle, making long-range contact a careful relay of signals powered by backup batteries or nuclear cores. And yet, the human drive to explore would not vanish. Imagine engineers designing massive artificial suns aboard ships, illuminating corridors, powering labs, and keeping life support systems alive. Astronauts would train to adapt to new rhythms, relying on artificial light cycles to regulate sleep, exercise, and work. Even in a universe darkened by the loss of our star, the spirit of exploration would continue, a testament to ingenuity. Traveling farther into the solar system would become a study in patience and innovation. The outer planets, usually bathed in faint sunlight, would now be completely frozen, and their moons darkened. Every mission would need to compensate for the lack of natural heating, keeping instruments operational in environments that are even harsher than before. You might picture scientists experimenting with radiant heaters, onboard fusion cores, and carefully insulated habitats to ensure that explorers survive the silent cold. The disappearance of the sun would not only change propulsion and energy, but also affect timing and calculations. Orbital mechanics would shift subtly as the sun's gravity fades, and routes that once relied on solar timing would need constant adjustment. Imagine crews recalculating positions, plotting courses with painstaking care, each correction a small victory in the face of overwhelming cosmic change. Even deep space probes would be affected. Instruments designed to absorb solar energy would need retrofitting or replacement. Space telescopes might need their own artificial suns to continue observing the universe, while rovers on distant planets would operate in complete darkness, their cameras capturing faint, cold reflections of worlds previously warmed by sunlight. You could imagine technicians monitoring every signal from Earth or spacecraft, holding their breath as data flickers across screens, each byte a fragile connection in a universe that has lost its central star. The disappearance of the sun transforms space travel from a familiar adventure into a struggle of survival, ingenuity, and resilience. Every mission would feel like stepping into a shadowed frontier, where human determination becomes the only source of light and energy. Imagine drifting past planets frozen in place, stars glinting faintly in the distance, and knowing that every path you take, every calculation you make, must be precise because the universe no longer gives you the sun as a guide. Would Earth ever be warm again without the sun? Well, picture standing on a frozen plain where every familiar sound seems muffled under layers of ice and snow. The oceans are locked in sheets of crystal. Forests and fields lie under frosty blankets, and even the wind feels sharp and hollow in the absence of sunlight. At first, it seems impossible to imagine warmth returning to a planet that once thrived under the sun's constant energy. Yet the story of Earth without its star is more complex and subtle than simply freezing into silence. Even without sunlight, Earth holds pockets of heat deep beneath its surface. You might imagine walking near a volcano, feeling the tremor of molten rock far below, the quiet reminder that our planet is alive with internal energy. Geothermal heat continues to pulse from the core, flowing up through cracks in the crust, warming deep caves, underground rivers, and hydrothermal vents in the oceans. Life clinging to these hidden places would still experience faint warmth, a whisper of survival in a world otherwise frozen. Imagine tiny organisms around a vent, glowing softly with energy, oblivious to the endless dark above, showing that life can endure even when the sun is gone. Over centuries, humans might learn to harness this hidden heat. Picture vast cities built around geothermal sources, steam rising from the ground in quiet plumes, heating streets, buildings, and artificial gardens. Engineers and architects could design insulated habitats, capturing what little warmth the planet offers and recycling it efficiently. The air might smell faintly of minerals and steam, a different kind of warmth than sunlight provides, but comforting in its own way. You might even hear the hiss of pipes carrying heat through tunnels that wind beneath the frozen surface, the sound a reminder that Earth is not completely defeated by the absence of its star. Still, sunlight provides energy in a way no underground warmth ever could. Photosynthesis stops, crops fail, and natural ecosystems collapse. Humans would need artificial light and heat to grow food, turning massive spaces into glowing greenhouses, filled with hydroponic gardens and radiant warmth. Imagine walking through one of these enormous greenhouses, leaves glistening with moisture, water trickling in carefully controlled channels, and the air vibrating softly with mechanical life support systems. This would be humanity's answer to the sun, a replacement that mimics sunlight with electricity, heaters, and LEDs, creating a semblance of life and warmth on a planet otherwise dominated by ice. The oceans, once warmed by the sun, would slowly cool from the surface down, leaving only deep currents heated by geothermal vents. Picture submarines gliding through dark waters, passing creatures adapted to extreme cold, glowing softly in the blackness, moving in ways shaped by survival rather than sunlight. Even here, humans could find warmth in technological habitats or insulated submersibles, exploring a world that has learned to endure the absence of its star. Over millennia, Earth's internal heat might continue to provide survival niches. You might imagine entire cities carved into rock beneath glaciers, connected by tunnels lit by artificial suns, with humans, animals, and plants eking out existence in an illuminated, warm network hidden from the frozen world above. Steam vents, hot springs, and volcanic regions would become centers of life, human ingenuity, turning Earth's residual heat into a lifeline for civilization. And yet, Earth would never truly regain the warmth of the sun's rays. You could picture a pale simulation of daytime inside artificial domes, but the planet itself would remain a frozen giant drifting through space, only faintly alive from the heat flowing deep within. The sun's disappearance would leave a permanent mark, a quiet reminder that even with all our technology, some warmth can only come from a star. Could nuclear power keep humanity alive without the sun? Well, imagine looking out across a frozen world where sunlight has vanished and the surface of Earth is locked in icy silence. Cities are dark except for the steady glow of distant reactors, humming quietly with life as they supply the energy that was once freely given by our star. Nuclear power becomes the heartbeat of civilization, the core around which survival spins, and every flicker of light or warmth is a reminder that humans have found a way to persist, even when the sun is gone. Picture enormous plants built underground or buried within mountains, carefully insulated to prevent heat loss. Steam rises from cooling towers, glowing faintly in the darkness, and engineers move among the humming machinery, checking gauges and valves that regulate the flow of energy. Each reactor produces not just electricity, but also the warmth needed to melt ice, heat greenhouses, and maintain breathable air in domed cities. You might notice the soft whirring of turbines as they convert nuclear reactions into usable power, every rotation a lifeline for those who rely on it. Even transportation depends on this energy. Submarines and trains glide quietly beneath frozen oceans and ice sheets, powered by reactors that hum with constant reliability. Picture scientists in control rooms monitoring the paths of supply vessels, ensuring that food, water, and fuel reach every outpost, every city tucked beneath the frozen surface. Without the sun, nuclear power is no longer optional but essential, the thread holding society together as the world above remains dark and cold. Food production also transforms. Greenhouses glow with artificial light, LEDs simulating the spectrum of sunlight, while nuclear-generated heat warms soil and water. You could imagine rows upon rows of vegetables, algae farms, and even vertical gardens, each plant relying entirely on human-created energy to grow. Pollination might be aided by robotic bees or human caretakers, and every harvest would be a small victory in a world where sunlight no longer exists. The smell of damp soil and warm air fills the space, a a faint reminder of the life that still persists, because humans have mastered energy in a way that nature alone can no longer provide. Communication, healthcare, and basic life support all become dependent on continuous energy. Hospitals, schools, and laboratories operate in a constant cycle powered by reactors, their systems monitored day and night. Imagine technicians working shifts to prevent failures, every decision crucial, because any disruption could threaten the delicate balance of survival. Even entertainment and culture adapt, with humans creating artificial daylight and warmth inside homes and public spaces, maintaining a sense of normalcy in an otherwise alien, frozen landscape. Over centuries, humanity might build massive networks, connecting reactors across continents, a lattice of energy, keeping pockets of civilization alive. Picture tunnels lined with pipes carrying heat, massive cables distributing power, and cities linked together in a web of warmth and light. Nuclear power would allow humanity not just to survive, but to thrive in underground cities, domed habitats, and floating platforms on frozen oceans, each environment meticulously engineered to replace the sun's vanished energy. Yet nuclear power comes with limits and dangers. You might imagine emergency drills, engineers checking containment structures, and communities learning to store fuel safely for decades. Waste management becomes a critical task, every spent fuel rod carefully contained, because a single mistake could bring disaster in a world where the sun's warmth and light are absent. The hum of these massive systems is both comforting and solemn, a constant reminder that survival depends on vigilance, knowledge, and ingenuity. Even with all this technology, Earth remains a transformed planet. The surface is a frozen expanse, oceans solid at the top, and forests and plains buried under ice. But beneath this frozen shell, reactors pulse with life, providing warmth, light, and hope. Imagine walking through a city built entirely underground, the air warm and filled with the quiet energy of countless reactors, artificial suns glowing in every room, every street, every school, and laboratory. Humanity clings to life by turning nuclear energy into a replacement for sunlight, a bridge between survival and extinction. In the long term, nuclear power could allow us to create self-sustaining habitats, recycle energy and matter efficiently, and maintain a global society even without the sun. Picture enormous underground farms, artificial rivers and lakes heated by reactors, and communities that thrive in carefully maintained ecosystems. Humans would adapt not just technologically, but culturally and psychologically, learning to live in a world where daylight exists only inside domes, where warmth comes from controlled fission reactions rather than a natural star. The story of nuclear power in a sunless world is one of adaptation, innovation, and human resilience. Every glowing reactor, every humming turbine, every plant grown under artificial light is a testament to the fact that life can endure even when the sun is gone. And as you imagine walking through these underground cities, feeling warmth in your hands and seeing the steady glow of human-made sunlight, it becomes clear that energy, knowledge, and ingenuity could indeed keep humanity alive, preserving hope in a universe that has lost its brightest star. Would life on Earth slowly fade away without the sun? Picture the world in that first eerie moment of absence, the familiar warmth vanishing, the skies darkening, and every living thing caught in a sudden silence. At first, some life might seem to carry on, like shadows stubbornly lingering in the frozen hours. But the truth is that the sun is the pulse behind nearly every rhythm on Earth. Without it, the clock of life begins to tick differently, slower, colder, and more precarious. You might imagine plants that once stretched toward the light, their leaves green and vibrant, now standing still and silent. Without sunlight, photosynthesis halts, and the very food chains that sustain animals start to collapse. Insects searching for nectar, birds migrating across continents, herbivores grazing in meadows suddenly, their routines become impossible. Picture a herd of deer wandering a frost-covered forest, finding nothing to eat, their breath misting in the icy air, while above them, The once brilliant canopy of leaves has withered or vanished completely. Animals that rely on the sun's heat also struggle. Cold-blooded creatures, reptiles and amphibians, find themselves paralyzed by the sudden drop in temperature. Fish in shallow lakes and streams face frozen surfaces, their movements slowed to near stillness. You might picture a frog frozen in a pond, or a lizard tucked under a rock, waiting for warmth that will not return. Even warm-blooded animals begin to feel the relentless drain of energy as they struggle to find shelter and food in a world that no longer produces either naturally. Microorganisms and deep-sea life hold a different story. You could imagine tiny colonies around hydrothermal vents, glowing faintly in the perpetual dark, feeding on chemical energy from Earth's core. They persist because they rely on internal heat rather than sunlight, a hidden life that hints at resilience even when the star above is gone. Picture a deep-sea vent, warm water streaming, small creatures clinging to mineral surfaces, moving in slow circles as if performing a ritual of survival. These pockets of life become the last bastions of biological activity, quiet reminders that some life can endure almost anything. Over time, larger ecosystems above ground would gradually fade. Forests, grasslands, and deserts shrink under ice and snow. Rivers freeze, lakes solidify, and storms carry snow instead of rain. You might imagine standing on a barren plain, the wind sharp against your face, and seeing skeletal trees clawing toward a sky that no longer gives warmth. Animals either die, migrate underground, or adapt in tiny niches where artificial light or geothermal heat can sustain them. Life becomes smaller, slower, more hidden, and quieter. Humans, however, may intervene. You could picture enormous domed cities filled with hydroponic gardens, algae farms, and artificial sunlight, preserving both plants and animals in carefully maintained pockets. Zoos, farms, and research stations transform into lifeboats for species that once thrived outdoors. Picture walking through a dome where birds flutter in carefully lit trees, insects buzz in artificial meadows, and the air hums faintly with life support systems. Humans become stewards, maintaining life not by natural cycles, but by technology, energy, and careful planning. Despite all human effort, the scale of the challenge is staggering. The vast majority of wild ecosystems would vanish. Oceans would cool from the top down, and the rhythm of life outside controlled environments slows to a crawl. You might imagine a polar ice sheet stretching farther and farther, swallowing the forests and plains that once thrived under sunlight. Even with artificial habitats, Earth's wild heart would be muted, the roar of life replaced by quiet hums of machines and controlled warmth. In this sunless world, life becomes both fragile and precious. Every plant grown in a greenhouse, every animal kept alive in artificial conditions, becomes a testament to resilience. Imagine peering into a glowing greenhouse at the last surviving flowers, or walking through an underground forest with artificial rain falling softly, leaves glistening in synthetic light. Life would not disappear entirely, but it would shift, retreat, and adapt in ways unimaginable in a world dominated by sunlight. The story of life without the sun is one of slow fading, of selective survival, of hidden resilience. Picture the contrast between frozen deserts above and warm pockets below, the struggle of creatures large and small, and the ingenuity of humans trying to preserve what was once taken for granted. Even in darkness, life finds ways to persist, whether in deep-sea vents, geothermal caves, or carefully engineered habitats, showing that while the sun is gone, the spark of life is not easily extinguished. How would the universe look to us without the sun? Imagine stepping outside, but the familiar blue sky is gone, replaced by an endless deep velvet that seems to stretch forever in every direction. You might feel a chill as your eyes adjust to the darkness, the way your vision slowly begins to pick out faint points of light scattered across the sky. Those points are stars, billions of them, suddenly more vivid, more twinkling, more alive than they ever appeared when the sun's glare dominated our view. Picture the Milky Way stretching across the heavens, a luminous river of stars, dust, and gas, now painted in sharper contrast against the black canvas above. You might notice constellations you once knew but never really saw, the shapes clearer, the spaces between stars more profound, more tangible. And far away, you could see galaxies as soft smudges of silver light, each one a collection of billions of stars dancing silently in the vast expanse. Imagine leaning back on a frozen plain, the wind biting at your cheeks, and looking up at clusters of stars that were invisible just moments before, feeling as if the universe has finally opened its private doors just for you. Without the sun, even our own planet becomes a glowing speck of reflected starlight, a small pale dot drifting in the void. You could picture the Earth, icy and dark, reflecting faint glimmers from the moon and nearby planets, a tiny lantern lost among countless other lights. The moon itself becomes more visible, its craters and mountains outlined in ghostly detail by starlight, each crater like a miniature theatre stage under cosmic illumination. And the planets beyond Earth, those distant wanderers, shift from faint invisible dots to more noticeable presences. You might imagine Venus glowing softly like a pearl, Jupiter displaying faint stripes of colour, and Saturn's rings casting delicate shadows against the emptiness. Each world becomes part of a vast, cosmic choreography that the sun once hid from our eyes. The universe feels bigger, stranger, and more infinite without that central star dominating our perception. Even the colours of the night sky change. Without the sun, the scattering of light in the atmosphere disappears, leaving behind darkness as pure as ink. You could picture the black sky above, punctuated by brilliant points of white, blue and reddish stars, some flickering, some steady, some sending light that began its journey to Earth millions or even billions of years ago. Each star is a story, a distant sun burning with its own energy, now visible in ways impossible before. The absence of sunlight also changes the way we perceive motion. Satellites orbiting Earth are now almost invisible unless they catch a glimmer of starlight, and meteors streaking across the sky leave brief, bright impressions in total darkness. You might imagine watching a meteor shower on a frozen night, each flash a sudden reminder of movement and energy in a universe that now feels eerily silent. Even the faint glow of the Milky Way seems to pulse slightly as your eyes adjust, showing patterns of stars and dust lanes that you never fully appreciated before. The night sky becomes immersive, almost overwhelming, as if you are floating in the cosmos itself. You might feel small but also connected, noticing the faint hum of the universe in your imagination, the vast network of light stretching across space and time. Picture reaching out in the cold, dark silence, sensing the distance to every star, every galaxy, and realizing that without the sun, the universe no longer feels like a background to our lives, but like a stage we are suspended within. In this world, the absence of sunlight sharpens our perception of the infinite. You could picture constellations we barely notice now, nebulae glowing faintly, and star clusters that appear suddenly in vivid clarity. The universe no longer hides behind the brightness of our star, but reveals its subtle beauty, its complex textures, and its endless depth. It is a universe at once alien and intimate, a world of endless light in the darkness, inviting us to see more than we ever could before. Even familiar skies become strange and new. Imagine looking at Orion and seeing the dim clouds of gas around its stars, noticing the faint shimmer of distant suns, and tracing lines between them that your mind had never connected before. The Pleiades cluster, previously a soft patch in twilight, now glimmers sharply, individual stars distinct and almost tangible. You might lean closer, your imagination filling in the vast distances between them, feeling the incredible scale and silence of space surrounding our tiny planet. And yet, Earth itself is part of this spectacle. You could picture the planet as a dim silhouette against the brilliance of the cosmos, the frozen oceans reflecting faint starlight, the mountains outlined in soft darkness, and the atmosphere glimmering like a fragile veil. Without the sun to dominate our perception, we notice the subtle radiance of every other celestial body, the interplay of light and shadow across our own world, and the intricate dance of planets, moons, and stars in ways previously hidden. The universe without the sun is a theatre of light and dark, a place where our eyes are forced to see and our minds are invited to imagine. Every star is brighter, every shadow more meaningful, every glimpse of distant galaxies more profound. You might feel a sense of awe and fragility, noticing the tiny dot that is Earth floating in the vast ocean of cosmic brilliance, and realizing that the sun's disappearance has unveiled the true spectacle of the heavens in all its raw and quiet glory. Could another star replace the sun someday? Picture yourself standing on the frozen surface of Earth, the sky a deep, endless black, the air biting cold, and suddenly imagining a new star slowly appearing in the distance. You might notice a tiny point of light at first, almost imperceptible, like a shy guest arriving at a cosmic party. As it grows brighter, imagine its warmth slowly reaching you, not immediately strong enough to thaw the frozen oceans or melt the ice-covered forests, but enough to promise the return of light and life, a gentle reassurance in the vast darkness. You could think about how this new star would not be our sun, but a different kind of sun, with its own personality and quirks. Maybe its light is bluer, sharper, colder to the eyes but still capable of casting shadows. Or perhaps it is softer, warmer and reddish, bathing the earth in a strange but comforting hue. Picture walking through snowfields or empty cities and noticing how the shadows lengthen differently under this unfamiliar light. How the familiar shapes of trees, mountains, and buildings are suddenly strange and beautiful again. Reach out in your mind and feel the faint radiance of this newcomer star. Imagine tiny sparks of energy brushing across your skin, a subtle reminder that the universe has not abandoned us completely. You might sense how slowly the Earth itself would begin to respond, the ice shifting just slightly, the atmosphere stirring in ways long dormant. Picture the oceans, still frozen and silent, starting to glint faintly as the star's light touches the surface, hinting at movement and the possibility of life returning to some forgotten corners of the planet. Imagine also how the rest of the solar system would react. The planets, once adrift in the darkness, might slowly begin to orient toward this new star, their orbits adjusting over millennia in a delicate dance dictated by its gravity. The moon would gleam under the star's unfamiliar light, its craters casting alien shadows that feel both haunting and mesmerizing. Even distant planets like Jupiter and Saturn could reflect this light in ways that remind us that the solar system is alive, even in the absence of the star we have always known. You might notice how the skies themselves would change. Without the overwhelming brightness of our sun, distant stars, nebulae, and galaxies would be more vivid than ever. But now the new star would compete gently with them, a soft glow that adds texture rather than domination. Picture the Milky Way stretching across the heavens, its intricate patterns of dust and starlight contrasting with the new star's unique hue. Each night would feel like a new painting, every dawn a slow unveiling of colors and shadows unlike anything you have seen before. And imagine the life that could adapt to this new light. Some plants and microorganisms might find a way to use it, even if the wavelengths are slightly different, the rhythms of growth and bloom slowly adjusting over generations. Animals might shift their behavior in response to the altered day and night cycle, learning new ways to hunt, forage, and survive. You could picture tiny ecosystems deep underground or in isolated pockets of warmth, beginning to sense that a source of energy has returned, sparking slow but persistent cycles of life. Think about human imagination and resilience. With this new star, we might invent new ways to capture its energy, to farm under its light, to explore and understand its nuances. Cities might glow differently at night, technology adapting to harness the star's unique warmth. Imagine children growing up seeing a sky unlike any previous generation, learning constellations that have shifted subtly because of the newcomer, hearing stories of the vanished sun while living in the light of a star that was never meant to be theirs but now illuminates their world. Picture the slow transformation of familiar landscapes. Ice sheets might begin to fracture and flow more freely, rivers could slowly awaken, forests stretching cautiously toward the distant warmth. The sense of desolation that gripped the planet after the sun disappeared would gradually soften, replaced by cautious hope, and a strange beauty found only in the resilience of life facing a universe that refuses to stay silent. And yet, the new star would not perfectly replicate the sun. You might notice that the warmth feels different on your skin, that the shadows fall at slightly odd angles, that the days feel longer or shorter depending on its distance. Even the seasons could be altered, a new rhythm imposed on the Earth, one that demands adaptation, creativity, and patience. Picture humanity learning to thrive under these new conditions, inventing new ways to grow food, produce energy, and survive while marveling at the alien but comforting light above. Reach out with your imagination and sense the cosmic dance. Think about how other civilizations on distant planets might experience a similar phenomenon. Stars dying and new ones taking their place. Planets slowly adjusting. Life finding a way in the most unlikely circumstances. The universe is not static, and the disappearance of one star might seem catastrophic, but the slow arrival of another shows that even in the face of darkness, the cosmos is capable of renewal, patience, and surprising beauty. You could picture standing on a mountaintop under this new star, the sky filled with unfamiliar constellations and the faint shimmer of distant galaxies, and feeling both small and connected. Imagine the ice crunching beneath your feet, the wind carrying the scent of frozen earth, and the light brushing softly across your face. The new star does not erase the loss of the sun, but it offers a new narrative, a new rhythm for life, and a reminder that the universe always has another story to tell if we are willing to look and feel its presence. Even the emotional landscape changes. You might feel awe, fear, curiosity, and hope mingling together as you witness a world slowly adapting to an alien sun. Picture communities gathering to watch the first faint rays of this star, scientists measuring its properties, poets writing lines inspired by its glow, children learning to play under its light. Every moment becomes a mixture of wonder and survival, imagination and adaptation, a testament to life's persistence and humanity's capacity to embrace the unknown. The universe without our sun is vast and chilling, but the emergence of another star reminds us that even in the coldest, darkest spaces, light can return in forms unexpected and beautiful. You might imagine slowly walking through forests or frozen plains, feeling the subtle heat on your face, noticing the glint of ice crystals sparkling like tiny diamonds, and sensing that this new star, while not the sun, has become a gentle companion on an otherwise lonely journey. Would humanity ever adapt to a sunless world? Imagine yourself walking through a city that has been plunged into permanent twilight, where the streets are lined with ice instead of asphalt, and the familiar hum of life carries a slightly hollow tone. You might notice the eerie quiet that comes from the absence of birdsong and the soft hiss of wind across frozen surfaces. Picture people learning to live in this strange reality, building homes that capture and store heat, tunnels and underground cities humming with artificial light and warmth. You could think about how our routines would change. Without the sun's natural cues, clocks and calendars would become inventions of pure necessity. Humans might develop new patterns of sleep and work, guided by artificial suns, glowing panels, and gentle lamps that mimic the rhythms of day and night. Imagine communities gathering around these light sources, sharing stories, teaching children about a world that once knew warmth and now must invent it for themselves. Consider our bodies adjusting to this absence. You might picture humans wearing layers of specialized clothing, designed not only for warmth but to simulate the feeling of sunlight on skin. Vitamin D and other essentials would come from supplements or engineered light, while exercise and activity would shift indoors or in protected spaces. Imagine gyms, greenhouses, and recreation centers becoming lifelines of both physical and emotional survival. Think about food. Picture sprawling indoor farms, vertical gardens glowing with artificial sunlight, nutrient-rich algae, and lab-grown meat becoming staples. Farmers would learn to manipulate light and heat in ways that mimic the sun's cycles, creating a rhythm for plants and animals alike. You might notice how humanity, always inventive, finds ways to coax life from soil and water, even when the sun no longer participates. Reach out and imagine the social and psychological changes. Communities might bond more tightly, relying on one another to survive in a cold, dark world. Art, music, and literature could thrive as outlets for the emotions of isolation and adaptation. Picture children learning to play under soft artificial light, their laughter echoing in tunnels or under domes, a reminder that even without a sun, human joy persists. You might consider energy as a lifeline. Nuclear power, geothermal heat, and fusion might become central to civilization, not just as convenience but as survival. Imagine cities glowing with warmth generated from deep beneath the earth, a web of light and life replacing the sun's absent rays. Humanity would innovate constantly, discovering new ways to capture energy, grow food, and maintain life under conditions that once seemed impossible. And yet there would be limits. Picture the psychological weight of knowing the sky will never glow with the familiar blue, the stars more brilliant but distant and alien. Humans might create virtual suns, immersive simulations, or communal rituals to mark time and seasons. Imagine the delicate balance of hope and ingenuity keeping civilization alive, while the cold, dark universe presses ever closer. Consider exploration. Some might look upward and outward, building spacecraft to seek other suns, other warmth. Humanity's drive to survive could lead to interstellar migration, colonies under artificial lights, and a permanent expansion into the cosmos. You might imagine children born in orbiting stations, learning about a vanished sun only from stories, never feeling its warmth but growing strong under the glow of engineered light. Picture the gradual evolution of culture in this new world. Stories would change. Religions and philosophies might shift to reflect a cosmos without a sun, but humans would continue to celebrate light and warmth wherever they can produce it. Imagine festivals of illumination, glowing gardens, and rituals that honor both survival and ingenuity. Even in a sunless world, human creativity would shine brightly. You could also picture subtle adaptations in physiology and behavior over generations. Humans might develop more sensitive vision for low light, changes in skin and metabolism, and cultural norms that embrace darkness as a part of life, rather than a void. Imagine societies learning to thrive in harmony with artificial cycles, underground cities, and cold landscapes, finding beauty in what once seemed bleak. Reach out with your imagination and sense the slow rhythm of a world redefined. The absence of the sun would not erase humanity. It would force us to become resourceful, inventive, and resilient beyond anything we have known. Picture a city lit by artificial suns, greenhouses glowing softly, humans walking across icy plains in warm layers, and communities gathering in tunnels and domes. Life would persist because humans have always been capable of reshaping the environment to survive. You might notice the quiet victories too, small details that mark adaptation, the faint steam rising from a greenhouse, children laughing in the glow of a manufactured sunrise, scientists measuring the subtle heat from artificial sources, artists painting glowing landscapes in imitation of sunlight. Every small act would be a testament to resilience. Even in a sunless world, humans could learn to thrive. Imagine gradually reclaiming warmth and light from technology, imagination, and determination. Picture your own steps through a city that has adapted, your breath visible in the cold air, your eyes adjusting to artificial rays, and a sense of wonder at how life persists, despite a universe that no longer gives its warmth freely. Life would not be easy, and the world would be strange, but human ingenuity, adaptability, and the desire to survive would transform darkness into opportunity, isolation into community, and cold into a landscape of possibilities. You could continue imagining how each generation adapts, building ever more sophisticated systems, learning from the failures and successes of those before them, and gradually creating a civilization that thrives without the sun, finding new ways to bring light into their lives. The ultimate ending without our star. Picture yourself standing on the frozen surface of a once vibrant Earth, the horizon stretching in shades of grey and pale blue, everything muted yet quietly alive. You might notice how even in this eternal cold, signs of life linger, small glimmers of warmth in underground cities, faint green shoots in carefully maintained hydroponic farms, communities huddled around artificial suns, and the soft hum of machines, keeping air breathable and water flowing. You could imagine the sky above, no longer painted in bright blues, no golden dawns, no fiery sunsets. Instead, the stars shine with unblinking clarity, revealing galaxies and cosmic wonders that were once hidden in daylight. Reach out and sense the vastness above, a reminder that even without our sun, the universe continues, indifferent and awe-inspiring. The absence of sunlight has reshaped life, but it has also given humans a new perspective on existence, adaptation, and the delicate threads that hold civilization together. Think about what humanity has learned in this final chapter. Every invention, every new method of survival, every culture that evolved under artificial skies tells a story of resilience. You might notice how communities thrive in ways that were once unimaginable, how curiosity and determination shape every corner of life, and how the human spirit refuses to fade, even when the natural star that once gave warmth and light is gone. Imagine walking through a city or a settlement illuminated by artificial suns, feeling the air carry the warmth carefully balanced by technology. Children laugh, scientists measure and experiment, artists create glowing works, and everyday life continues, adapted but not broken. Even in a world without our star, humanity has found ways to celebrate light, nurture life, and remember the sun that once ruled the sky. The oceans, frozen and quiet, hold secrets beneath their surfaces. The atmosphere, still present, wraps the planet in a cold embrace. Plants and animals that survive underground or under domes continue the dance of life in small, managed ecosystems. Humans, resilient as ever, have learned to live with the absence of their primary source of energy, finding substitutes, inventing solutions, and building societies that could never have existed before. Picture the long-term view. Generations have grown up without feeling sunlight on their skin, without witnessing a sunrise, but they have learned to find wonder in artificial dawns, the glow of carefully designed lights, and the brilliance of stars that were always there but are now seen in full clarity. Humans have become caretakers not only of life but of warmth, light, and hope, in a universe that no longer provides them freely. Reach out with your mind and feel the quiet majesty of a planet transformed. Life is not gone, it has evolved. Humanity has survived and adapted, not in the comforting embrace of its star, but in the ingenuity, resilience, and communal spirit that define us. Even without the sun, Earth is alive, and humans continue to explore, to imagine, and to create. And as you stand there in your mind, among frozen seas, glowing cities, and endless stars, you realize that the ultimate ending without our star is not total darkness. It is a story of survival, of innovation, of human spirit illuminated by the light we make for ourselves. The sun may be gone, but humanity endures, carving warmth from cold, life from silence, and hope from absence. So now, imagine the very last scene of this journey. Picture yourself standing on a quiet ridge, looking out over the frozen plains and faintly glowing cities below. The stars stretch endlessly above, brighter than ever, and somewhere in the distance, a small artificial sun hums, sending a gentle warmth across the ground. You might notice the subtle movements of life, tiny plants in domes, humans walking between softly lit shelters, the faint shimmer of underground rivers. It feels strange and new, a world that is both alien and familiar. The earth has changed, the sun is gone, yet life continues, in ways both fragile and astonishing. And as you take it all in, you realize that this is not an ending in the sense of nothingness. It is an ending of one chapter and the quiet beginning of countless others. Humanity has learned to adapt, to survive, and to find meaning even when the sky above no longer offers warmth. Feel the calm around you, the hush of a world without daylight, and the gentle persistence of life everywhere you look. In the absence of our star, Humans have become both caretakers and explorers, shaping their own light, creating their own warmth, and carrying hope forward into the long, dark night. So as you take one last glance at this transformed world, remember that even without the sun, life endures, and the human spirit continues to shine, softly, steadily, and brilliantly, in every invention, every connection, every quiet moment of survival and wonder. This is the ultimate ending, a reflection not of loss, but of resilience, imagination, and the endless capacity of life to adapt. The sun may be gone, but the story of Earth and its people goes on, glowing quietly in the darkness and inviting every mind to dream, explore, and create light where there is none.